Right, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. As we mentioned last time that I will go over my own journey on this path to the Quran. And I will very briefly go over some part of my biography. I'm basically a BSc Agriculture Engineering, then I joined Army. And then back in 1988, I left Army because I was not very pleased with the environment over there in Pakistan. And during the process of that Army career, I did courses in America as well as in Australia. And I had a fairly good career, but it was not really was causing a lot of pain and grief to me personally. So I came here in 1989, and that is migrated to Scotland, Glasgow, and did some grocery shop business, but didn't like it. And then got admission in MSc Water Engineering. During that MSc, I got a research fellowship in the University of Strathclyde, and then part of the research fellowships, there are 3 or 4 I did. I did my PhD as well in water treatment. After that, I got a job with the Scottish Water as drinking water quality specialist and retired in 2014. So that is briefly my background. Now, what I'll do is I'll conceptually, or in terms of belief, I'll went through literally 3 phases. The first phase was the religious phase, and we all know that whatever religious phase we inherit, we just stick to it. But I was not fanatic. I said my namaz as and when I could. Also went to Jummah prayers and continued till about 1993. Went to Pakistan, and over there I met a cousin of mine. And at that time I had started reading and going through Tafhimul Quran by Maulana Maududi. And I found it very fascinating, never questioned it. I also went through Sirat An-Nabi by Suleiman Nadwi. And there are about, I think, 6 or 7 volumes of it. And never questioned that. And which is very interesting. When I look back, I didn't find anything wrong with that because I went through it on the basis of my religious belief system. And it supported that belief system which I inherited. And this is something which I always keep in mind when I talk to people around, that they have inherited it and they think this is truth. They don't need to change it. So they never question their belief system. So 1993 was a changing year because this cousin of mine who is in Faisalabad, Pakistan, he gave me Islam Challenge to Religion, letter to Saleem, and letter to Tahira. And I brought them back. He said few things, which was very interesting because all these Tolu Islam people, which I learned later on, they always bring over the Quran and go through the verses right in front of you with normal translations. And this is what Dr. Azhar did. He brought the Quran and he went through the translations. And I found there is nothing wrong with that. And what he was trying to explain was absolutely right. So I came out with a questioning mind. So came back to Glasgow, went through Islam Challenge to Religion, and I found it very interesting and puzzling as well. Because Allama Parwez was discussing those things which had never crossed my mind. Very logical, very rational. But one of the things I noticed was that he was picking up one part of the verse here and then another part of the verse, and then try to correlate them. And I had never gone through that kind of a book before, because Tafhimul Quran by Maududi Sahab was in one continuity. What he was doing was he will explain the verse, then quote some ahadith with that, and then move on. And Allama Parwez was tackling it totally different because he was cross-referencing. And of course, he also was bringing in what the modern thinkers and philosophers and psychologists had written about the human psyche as well as the past history. So that was very revealing, and I benefited from that, but with a skeptical mind. Then I started asking questions. When I went to the university, I also started talking to a lot of these international students. There were students from Saudi Arabia as well. And I found that they were all deeply religious. They were not willing to think outside the box. So I attended a dars over here in Glasgow, which was conducted under Islamic Society of Britain, ISB. And at that time, I had met Dr. Wasim as well, who was also doing PhD in architecture. And I attended those darses, and over there, one thing happened. One day we were going through some verses. The pattern was that each one of us will get a section of the Quran, and we will prepare it and then go over there and present our presentation, present our understanding to everyone. There used to be about 10, 15 people, and some converted Muslims were also there, and I spoke to them as well. So one day a verse said, there was some explanation of a verse, and a guy from one of these Arab countries said that we cannot be like the Quran. And I immediately said, why can't we be? He said, brother, we have our faults. I said, then what is the point of having this Quran if we cannot be like the Quran? And that was putting cat among the pigeons. Everyone stood up and they started gunning me down. And I firmly stood my ground. I said, no, I'm not going to budge an inch. The reason was that going back in 70s, once I was attending Friday prayers with my father, and I remembered Maulvi Sahib, while giving Jummah khutbah, he said that we cannot be like the Quran in today's world. Those companions and messenger of Allah, they were special people. They could follow the Quran. We cannot follow it the way they followed. And to my surprise, my father got up and he challenged Maulvi, and he said, Maulana, you are not right. Quran still has got efficacy. It's the same importance as Quran had then. And that was very strange to me. I kept quiet, and there was no trouble in the Jummah prayer because Maulana knew my father very well. So on the way back, I asked my dad and I said, I don't think you were right. He said, no, the Maulvi Sahib was wrong because he says that Quran was the formula which was only applicable for that time, and now it has lost its efficacy. And this appealed to me. But interesting is that my father never went ahead and explained it to me. He never ever talked about the Quran to me. He never ever talked about the biography of the messenger, despite the fact that he had also gone through Sirat al-Nabi by Sulaiman Nadwi, which perplexes me. So I then continued with that dars, and one day somebody from Tolu Islam also turned up there. And he questioned us, and he said, this punishment of stoning to death is not in the Quran. And surprisingly, I was the one who told him that it is in Hadith. Now, he kept quiet on that, and he never returned. Only once he made his appearance in that dars. And I go back and I said, why didn't he tell me that you mean that Allah forgot to put this punishment in the Quran? And that would have shortened my journey towards the Quran. So it continued for a year or so. And in the meantime, I went through Parwez Sahib's book. Also, there was another couple of Urdu books. I also went through them. Then one day I realized there was a Muslim convert who was with me. I was dropping him off to his house. And on the way, he said, Ejaz, what is this hadith business? I don't understand. Because if you say there is a hadith as well, that means Quran is not complete. And that did the job. His name was Richard. He has sadly died sometime back recently. And that appealed to me. I said, if Quran is from Allah, it must be complete. And that changed my outlook. Thanks to that, to Richard. So what happened was, then later on, I got all the books from Lahore and I started going through Allama Parwez books. And as I went through them, it dawned on me that Quran is giving us a system. And now the question which came to my mind was, what do we do? Because the criteria which is given by the Quran, most of these Muslims around us do not even think about it. And all of them are concentrating on the ritualized versions of Islam. So much so that even these 5 pillars, which we call them 5 pillars, do not have the Quran. And when I questioned some of them, they were also surprised. They said, oh, we never thought about it. So the struggle went on. I discussed virtually with every student around us, with Arabs, non-Arabs, others, Pakistanis, and all of them were falling well short, and they all thought that they are following what is their version of Islam is. And none of them were willing to give up their sects. And that was interesting, because whenever I questioned them, that Messenger of Allah had no sect, and they will agree. They will nod their head in a big way, but they were not willing to give up their own sect because they felt very uncomfortable, because the advantages which they had by relating themselves to these sects, those they would have lost. So that was the fear, deep down fear they had. But at the time, I didn't know much about psychology. So this journey went on till about 2002, 2003. And then it took a slightly better turn, because one of my friends, I think a brother Iftikhar knows him, Pagham Mustafa, he had a video, VCR video of Allama Parwez on Surah An-Nahl, 53rd chapter. And he gave me that. And from there, the step change, there's a very steep step change in my outlook, because I got in touch with the brother Farat Makbul from London and got all the videos sent over to me gradually. And the routine was like this, as Brother Iftikhar also said, that I'll get the video after doing my research work in the university, for example, late 9, 10. I will then go through a video every night. Went through Allama Parwez books, went through some of the audios, and gradually it dawned on me that this system of Deen, if we follow it as Momineen, if we convert ourselves to that high level of differentiation, should I say, or that discernment which the Quran is putting before us. And at that time, the model of Hazrat Yusuf came before me. And I said, if one man can get Allah's help, and of course, when I went through some of the verses of Surah Nur, where Quran says that Allah has promised to those who have Eimaan and do Saleh deeds that He will establish them in the land. I said, these things are within our reach. So what should I do as an individual? And it was a very big challenge, because up to that point, the life was on a slightly different pattern. It was a mix of religion and some concepts of the Quran and what Allama Parwez had explained. I thought that the things are within our reach. And this was roughly the time of, should I say, I was around 50, 55. And I said, let us take it on. Doesn't matter if somebody comes to this path or not. Let me be the pioneer. Let me make an effort and understand as a first step what is given in the Quran and how can I develop my own self. And that gave me a lot of strength, and immense strength, in fact. And after that, the things started falling in place, because then I went through human psychology. And in one of the papers, a psychologist had written that the beauty of understanding human psychology is that all of us have the same psyche. So if I can resolve my own issues and understand my own issue as a human being, then essentially I understand every human being on the planet Earth. And that helped me, because while I was questioning others, talking to others, studying my own children, studying people around me, friends, families, visiting Pakistan, all these things helped me to understand other psyche. And at the same time, I was going through different papers to understand the latest about human psyche, like emotions, intellectual outlook, goals in life, meaning of life, And then I started reading because Allama Parwez had referred to like Eric Fromm, Carl Jung, and other philosophers and thinkers. So I got some of those books and started going through them. They were very difficult books, not easy. And at that time, we didn't have many people around us with whom I could discuss as well. But gradually, more people joined in. And I could discuss with them, including Pagam. I discussed a lot with him as well. But he took his own path, individual one, rather than being part of Tolu Islam, which was fine. And this helped me to understand that this word around us, we don't have to accept it, at least intellectually. If we reject this word intellectually, we say we don't accept it. While working in it, like myself, I was working in Scottish Water and doing my job perfectly well. And I treated every customer extremely well and was very extremely helpful. And it never crossed my mind that somehow, why should I work in a man-made system which is not good for the wider mankind? So that was not an issue. Issue was that I'm getting paid for that, so I must do my best, as long as it is not going against any of the permanent values. At the same time, I discussed with people within Scottish Water as well, and local people. And interestingly, they all listened to me very patiently. And some of them agreed as well, and they very clearly said that this system is not for me. My life is fine, and I don't think there is a life beyond death, which was fine. They were making their choices. And I was quite happy to live with those choices because it's none of my business. Because by then I had understood the importance of choice and intent kept within us. But the difficult part was to relate to our I, our sense of being, which was very difficult. And I tried to understand that so that when I explain to others, it should be evidence-based. For example, Quran says there's a hereafter and you will get assurance of the hereafter. How do you get assurance of the hereafter? So this point took me a while to understand it. And I was very glad when I understood it, that exactly how to get this assurance, because it's all inbuilt within us and it is all based on our Eimaan and Saleh deeds. Then the next issue was that why do human beings do wrong to others? And that was again a very difficult challenge for me to understand. And for that, what I did was that I looked at other human beings as all possessing I. And one of the lectures by Allama Parwez solved the issue when he said that when a child is born, it is equal to any other child in the world. The child doesn't bring anything to this life. And what I added to that was that when we die, we don't take anything with us. So how does this self go through the physical life? So these were big challenges, and not only big challenges that I should understand them first myself, then to communicate to others. And you must have seen that in all my slides, I concentrate a lot on this issue so that we come to grips with this issue by elevating the stature of our own self to that level where we understand these issues ourselves. Because if I understand something, I should be able to explain to others that what change they need to bring within themselves to understand that if they have a developed self or not, and how to utilize the Quranic criterion to check it. So these were the issues which faced me then something around 2010 onwards. And then another step change came. We got a friend of ours, Iftikhar Bhai knows him, Brother Khalid Sayyid. He was doing some translation work. One day he phoned me and he said, can I help in the work of Lughatul Quran? It has already been translated, but if I could go through it and review it and maybe edit it. So he sent me some words. I think it started from Seen or Sheen or something like that. So I went through it and I enjoyed it. And that opened up our path towards translating books. So I spoke to my wife. I said, should we do this Jahane Farda, the life in the hereafter? And she happily agreed. So what I did was then I translated it. It was not easy because we know Allama Parwez Urdu is quite of a very high standard. But I managed to translate it. And then we went through it. Initially, we argued literally in every line, but gradually things got better because we got more practice. So that was a very big step change because these books helped me to broaden my own horizon. And of course, I discussed with others as well. And then as it happened that we went from one book to another book to another book, another book, and it gave a very high meaning aim to me. And this, of course, journey is still continuing. Then in 2019, in fact, 2015, I got in touch with Tolu Islam and started taking more interest on that. And the previous chairman, Akram Rathore, was a very quiet person, but he pointed to me some issues with the financing and other difficulties they were facing in Lahore. And I, at the time, Brother Iftikhar was the representative in London, and I got in touch with him. In fact, I went over to London as well around 2012-13 when my daughter went over there to do her hospital jobs. And I met him, and he was extremely hospitable and accommodated a lot of my emotiveness as well. And we had good discussion, and that companionship then developed and grew and became stronger and stronger with the passage of time. So today, where we are. So 2019, when I took more interest in Idara Tolu Islam, also interest Tolu Islam and their affairs. And 2020, COVID-19 came as a blessing because at the end of 2020, we got onto Zoom. I'm not an IT expert, or IT is not something my strength. But I had learned some of the program writing as well as dealing with the basics of computing. So it helped. So from Zoom, then we started sharing these presentations. And initially I was a bit, let me tell you very frankly, I was nervous. I was not very confident. I thought this is a big task I'm taking, but I said, let us take it step by step. And with the cooperation of all of our members, we are now into the end of our third year. And it has become better and better because our understanding has gone from something which was not as great at that time in 2020 at the end. And now it is far better because we can understand some finer aspects of our own psyche in relation to the Quran. And interestingly, the word outside has also changed. The word has declined in some ways. It has gone better in technology. For example, we are now talking of AI. But at the time, these things were in initial stages. So we can now see the law of requital is working in the world and is visibly working because the things have gone pretty bad in Pakistan and have also gone bad in other parts of the world. And so this has strengthened our resolve that law of requital is working. And we can see that our efforts will, at least in terms of presenting something for the wider public in the world, to understand that Quran is talking about the system of Deen, an alternative to man-made system. It is not a book of religion. It is a book which is addressing Momineen who have to come together and then establish the system of Deen. So something which is of great and immense value for all of us. So it is not about me or any one of us individually, but collectively, we have managed to motivate ourselves and reach that stage where we can pass on to others our own understanding and discuss with them that what Quran is telling us is very much about this life of ours. We don't have to live life under fear and grief, but we can move on to a better system. But it will take time. Now, what is the final motivation on this path? Firstly, I will go through few things. In this struggle of mine, and of course, struggle of ours, we have concluded few things from the Quran. Number one is that Quran is not the product of the human intellect. And we have seen it, all these things which we are discussing, human beings cannot talk about it without the Quran. Second is it outlines the fundamentals of the system of Deen. And rest of the sub-clauses we can figure out. And with the understanding now we have, by being together, we can figure out the sub-clauses. It is not a complicated book at all. Human system is extremely complicated because human beings like creating complication for other human beings, because that is the way people in power can get away with their crimes. But Quran is very straightforward. And those people who follow the Quran are also very transparent and straightforward. It is not about their own self. It is about the good of mankind. The next point, which I emphasize again and again, we find this man-made system in which we are born. Should we continue with it? If we are going to continue with it, despite coming to the Quran, and Quran not helping us, or Allah does not help us, inverted commas, help his laws, then what is the point of following this path? So the important issue which Quran places before us is that first you do is to change your psyche. And psyche change does not cost anything. All we need is to keep putting effort on this. And the change itself will manifest to us that this system of Deen is workable. It is placed within our reach. And that is something which is very important, that we can get Allah's help, because human systems are bypassed when we come to the Quran. And this is something which I would like to see before I leave this life. And that is how I'm working. So I'm explaining my aim to you, that I want to work to that extremities within the restrictions and confines of the man-made system, all those problems which they are creating for us. Despite those difficulties and hardships, we should continue working on it to the best of our ability, and then see what happens, let's say in 5 years, 10 years. So that when all of us, as and when, depending on where we are in life, we leave this life, at least we can tell ourselves that we did our best. Remember those malaika? We have to tell those malaika that we have done our best, and that you get ready to help us in the life of the hereafter as well. So this is the way I think. Next is, Tolu Islam is not perfect. And we all know it. Because it cannot be perfect, because sum total of all of us. So our individual weaknesses, vulnerabilities, limitations also contribute to its strength. But our aim, our outlook, our love and affection for the Quran, our dedication, our firmness towards the Quran is its strength. So that is what we should keep in mind, rather than concentrating on weaknesses which will disappear gradually. Because all those who have come to the Quran are the ones who have read the system of Deen from the books of Allama Parwez. And they have at least acquired a minimum threshold level of moving away from the religious perspectives. They have come to the Quran and they take the Quran as complete guidance for them. It is not an ordinary achievement. It's a massive achievement with so much opposition around us in the world and wherever we are living. Now, finally, it is an uphill task, Quran itself has said, but we are not alone. When I say alone, because what Quran does is that it keeps providing strength to our psyche. And that is why I but I always keep motivating our members that they should come and make an effort to attend this presentation. Sitting at home, if you have time, and sitting at home and say, I can't be bothered, that means we are not fully committed. If we have time, if we are not working somewhere, we have some other urgent tasks, then if we can make available, then we should be part of this platform. Because this platform owes its strength to its members. And then we are telling Allah that on this path of yours, we are willing to spare some time depending on our commitments within the man-made system. Because this is something which may not be visible to us initially, but as time passes, this adds strength to ourselves. And with that, I come to the end of this. Sorry for taking so much time, but I thought I should explain the perspective or the background with which I have traveled all this journey on the path of the Quran. Thank you very much for listening.